right, part two. It is our comprehensiveness now, or this matter of co-committance of darkness, that we are going to capitalize. It is all very complicated and tremendous, and our own treatment can be but impressionistic. But a few of the rudiments of advanced seismology we shall now take up, or the four principal phenomena of another world's close approach to this world. If a large substantial mass or a superconstruction should enter this Earth's atmosphere, it is our acceptance that it would sometimes, depending on velocity, appear luminous or look like a cloud, or like a cloud with a luminous nucleus. Later we shall have an expression upon luminosity, different from the luminosity of incandescence, that comes upon objects falling from the sky or entering this Earth's atmosphere. Now our expression is that the worlds have often come close to this Earth, and that smaller objects, size of a haystack or size of several dozen skyscrapers lumped, have often hurtled through this Earth's atmosphere and have been mistaken for clouds because they were enveloped in clouds. Or that around something coming from the intense cold of interplanetary space, blah, 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 that is, of some regions, our own suspicion is that other regions are tropical. The moisture of this Earth's atmosphere would condense into a cloud-like appearance around it. In Nature 20-121, there is an account by Mr. S. W. Clifton, collector of customs at Fremantle, Western Australia, sent to the Melbourne Observatory a clear day, appearance of a small black cloud moving not very swiftly, bursting into a ball of fire of the parent size of the moon, or that something with the velocity of an ordinary meteorite could not collect vapor around it, but that slower moving object sped of a railway train, say, may. The clouds of tornadoes have so often been described as if they were solid objects, that I now accept that sometimes they are, that some so-called tornadoes are objects hurtling through this Earth's atmosphere, not only generating disturbances by their suctions, but crushing with their bulk all things in their way, rising and falling and finally disappearing, demonstrating that gravitation is not the power that the primitives think it is. If an object moving at relatively low velocity be not pulled to this Earth, or being so momentarily affected, bounds away. In Finley's reports on the character of 600 tornadoes, very suggestive bits of description occur. Cloud bounded along the Earth like a ball, or that it was no meteorological phenomenon, but something very much like a huge solid ball that was bounding along, crushing and carrying with it everything within its field. Cloud bounded along, coming to Earth every 800 or 1,000 yards. Here's an interesting bit that I got somewhere else. I offer it as a datum in superbiology, which, however, is a branch of advanced science that I'll not take up, restricting to things indefinitely called objects. The tornado came wriggling, jumping, whirling like a great green snake, darting out a score of glistening fangs. Though it's interesting, I think that's sensational myself. It may be that fast green snakes sometimes rush past this Earth, taking a swift bite wherever they can, but as I say, that's a biologic phenomenon. Finley gives dozens of instances of tornado clouds that seem to me more like solid things swathed in clouds than clouds. He notes that in a tornado at Americus, Georgia, July 18, 1881, a strange sulfurous vapor was emitted from the cloud. In many instances, objects or meteoric stones have come from this Earth's externality, have had a sulfurous odor. Why a wind effect should be sulfurous is not clear. That a vast object from external regions should be sulfurous is in line with many data. This phenomenon is described in the Monthly Weather Review, July 1881, as a strange sulfurous vapor, burning and sickening all who approached close enough to breathe it. The conventional explanation of tornadoes as wind effects, which we do not deny in some instances, is so strong in the United States that it is better to look elsewhere for an account of an object that has hurtled through this Earth's atmosphere, rising and falling and defying this Earth's gravitation. Nature 7/112. That, according to the correspondent of the Birmingham Morning News, the people living near King Sutton, Banbury, saw about 1 o'clock December 7th, 1872, something like a haycock hurtling through the air. Like a meteor, it was accompanied by fire and a dense smoke and made a noise like that of a railway train. It was sometimes high in the air and sometimes near the ground. The effect was tornado-like. Trees and walls were knocked down. It's a late day now to try to verify this story, but a list is given of persons whose property was injured. We are told that this thing then disappeared all at once. These are the smaller objects which may be derailed railway trains or big green snakes for all I know, but our expression upon approach is this earth by vast dark bodies. That likely they'd be made luminous, would envelop in clouds, perhaps, or would have their own clouds. But they'd quake, and that they'd affect this earth with quakes. And that then would occur a fall of matter from such a world, or rise of matter from this earth to a nearby world, or both fall and rise, or exchange of matter, process known to advanced seismology as celestiometastasis. Except that if matter from some other world, and it would be like someone to get it into his head that we absolutely deny gravitation just because we cannot accept orthodox dogmas, except that if matter from another world filling the sky of this earth generally as to a hemisphere or locally should be attracted to this earth, it would seem thinkable that the whole thing should drop here and not merely its surface materials. Objects upon a ship's bottom. From time to time they drop to the bottom of the ocean. The ship does not. Or, like our acceptance upon dripping from aerial ice fields, we think of only a part of a nearby world succumbing, except in being caught in suspension to this earth's gravitation and surface materials falling from that part. Explain or express or accept, and what does it matter? Our attitude is, here are the data, see for yourself. What does it matter what my notions may be? Here are the data. But think for yourself or think for myself, all mixed up we must be, as long time must go by before we can know Florida from Long Island. So we've had data of fishes that have fallen from our now established and respectabilized Super Sargasso Sea, which we've almost forgotten. It's now so respectable. But we shall have data of fishes that have fallen during earthquakes. These we accept were dragged down from ponds or other worlds that have been quaked when only a few miles away by this earth, some other world also quaking this earth. In a way, or in its principle, our subject is orthodox enough, only grant proximity of other worlds, which, however, will not be a matter of granting, but will be a matter of data, and one conventionally conceives of their surfaces quaked, even of a whole lake full of fishes being quaked and dragged down from one of them. The lake full of fishes may cause a little pain to some minds, but the fall of sand and stones is pleasantly enough thought of. More scientific persons, or more faithful hypnotics than we, have taken up this subject unpainfully relatively to the moon. For instance, Perry has gone over 15,000 records of earthquakes, and he has correlated many with proximities of the moon, or has attributed many to the pull of the moon when nearest the earth. Also, there is a paper upon this subject in the Proc Royal Society of Cornwall, 1845, or theoretically, when at its closest to this earth, the moon quakes the face of this earth and itself quaked, but does not itself fall to this earth. As to showers of matter that may have come from the moon at such times, one can go over old records and find what one pleases. That is what we now shall do. Our expressions are for acceptance only. Our data. We take them from four classes of phenomena that have preceded or accompanied earthquakes: unusual clouds, darkness profound, luminous appearances in the sky, and falls of substances and objects, whether commonly called meteoric or not. Not one of these occurrences fits in with principles of primitive or primary seismology, and every one of them is a datum of quaked body passing close to this earth or suspended over it. To the primitives, there is not a reason in the world why a convulsion of this Earth's surface should be accompanied by unusual sights in the sky, by darkness, or by the fall of substances or objects from the sky. As to phenomena like these, or storms preceding earthquakes, the irreconcilability is still greater. It was before 1860 that Perret made his great complication. We take most of our data from lists compiled long ago. Only the safe and unpainful have been published in recent years, at least in ambitious, voluminous form. The restraining hand of the system, as we call it, whether it has any real existence or not, is tied upon the sciences of today. The uncanniest aspect of our quasi-existence that I know of is that everything that seems to have one identity has also as high a seeming of everything else. In this oneness of allness or continuity, the protecting hand strangles, the paternal stifles. Love is inseparable from phenomena of hate. There's only continuity. That is, in quasi-existence. Nature, at least in its correspondence column, still evades this protective strangulation, and the monthly weather review is still a rich field of unfaithful observation. But in looking over other long-established periodicals, I have noted their glimmers of quasi-individuality fade gradually. After about 1860 and the surrender of their attempted identities to a higher attempted organization. Some of them expressing intermediateness, wide endeavor to localize the universal or to localize self, soul, identity, entity, or positiveness or realness held out until as far as 1880, traces findable up until 1890, and then expressing the universal process, except that here and there in the world's history there may have been successful approximations of positiveness by individuals who only then became individuals and attained to themselves or souls of their own, surrendered, submitted, became parts of a higher organization's attempt to individualize or systematize into a complete thing, or to localize the universal or the attributes of the universal. After the death of Richard Proctor, whose occasional illiberalities I'd not like to emphasize too much, all succeeding volumes of knowledge have yielded scarcely an unconventionality. Note the greater number of times that the American Journal of Science and the report of the British Association are quoted. Note that, after, say, 1885, they're scarcely mentioned in these inspired but illicit pages, as by hypnosis and inertia we kept on saying about 1880, throttle and disregard. But the coercion could not be positive, and many of the excommunicated continue to creep in, or, even to this day, some of the strangled are faintly breathing. Some of our data have been hard to find. We could tell stories of great labor and fruitless quest that would, though perhaps imperceptibly, stir the sympathy of Mr. Simmons, but in this matter of occurrence of earthquakes with aerial phenomena which are as unassociable with earthquakes, if internally caused, as falls of sand on convulsed small boys full of sour apples, the abundance of so-called evidence is so great that we can only sketchily go over the data, beginning with Robert Mallet's catalog, omitting some extraordinary instances because they occurred before the 18th century. Earthquake preceded by a violent tempest. England, January 8th, 1704. Preceded by a brilliant meteor. Switzerland, November 4th, 1704. Luminous cloud moving at high velocity, disappearing behind the horizon. Florence, December 9th. 1731, thick mists in the air through which a dim light was seen several weeks before the shock. Globes of light had been seen in the air. Swabia, May 22nd, 1732, reign of earth. Capenetrus, France, October 18th, 1737, a black cloud. London, March 19th, 1750, violent storm and a strange star of octagonal shape. Slavange, Norway, April 15th, 1752, balls of fire from a streak in the sky. Augermanland, 1752, numerous meteorites. Lisbon, October 15th, 1755, terrible tempests over and over, falls of hail and brilliant meteors, instance after instance, an immense globe. Switzerland, November 2nd, 1761, oblong sulphurous cloud. Germany, April 1767, extraordinary mass of vapor. Boulogne, April 1780, heavens obscured by a dark mist. Grenada, August 7th, 1804, strange howling noises in the air and large spots obscuring the sun. Palmero, Italy, April 16th, 1817, luminous meteor moving in the same direction as the shock. Naples, November 22nd, 1821, fireball appearing in the sky, apparent size of the moon. Thuringwald, November 29th, 1831. And unless you be polarized by the new dominant, which is calling for recognition of multiplicities of external things as a dominant dawning new over Europe in 1492, called the recognition of terrestrial externality to Europe, unless you have this contact with the new, you have no affinity for these data, beings that drop from a magnet, irreconcilables that glide from the mind of a Thompson. For my own acceptance that we do not really think at all, that we correlate around supermagnets that I call dominants, a spiritual dominant in one age, and responsively to it upsprings monasteries, and the stake and the cross are its symbols. A materialist dominant and upspring laboratories and microscopes and telescopes and crucibles are its icons, that were nothing but iron filings relatively to a succession of magnets that displace preceding magnets. With no soul of your own and with no soul of my own, except that someday some of us may no longer be intermediatisms, but may hold out against the cosmos, that once upon a time thousands of fishes were cast from one pail of water. We have psychovaliancy for these data, if we're obedient slaves to the new dominant, and repulsion to them if we're mere correlates to the old dominant. I'm a soulless and selfless correlate to the new dominant myself. I see what I have to see. The only inducement I can hold out in my attempt to rake up disciples is that someday the new will be fashionable. The new correlates will sneer at the old correlates. After all, there is some inducement to that. I am not altogether sure it's desirable to end up as a fixed star. As a correlate to the new dominant, I am very much impressed with some of these data. The luminous object had moved in the same direction as an earthquake. It seems very acceptable that a quake followed this thing as it passed near this Earth's surface. The streak that was seen in the sky, or only a streak that was visible of another world, and objects or meteorites that were taken down from it. The quake at Capentras, France, and that above Capentras was a smaller world, more violently quaked, so that Earth was shaken down from it. But I like best the superwolves that were seen to cross the sun during the earthquake of Palermo. They howled, or the loves of the worlds, the call they feel for one another. They try to move closer and howl when they get there. The howls of the planets. I have discovered a new unintelligibility. In the Edinburgh New Philosophical Journal, have to go way back to 1841, days of less efficient strangulation. Sir David Milne lists phenomena of quakes in Great Britain. I pick out a few that indicate to me that other worlds were near this Earth's surface. Violent storm before a shock of 1703, ball of fire preceding 1750, a large ball of fire seen upon day following a quake. 1755, uncommon phenomenon in the air, a large luminous body bent like a crescent which stretched itself over the heavens. 1816, vast ball of fire. 1750, black rains and black snows. 1755, numerous instances of upward projection or upward attraction during quakes preceded by a cloud very black and lowering. 1795, fall of black powder preceding a quake by 6 hours. 1837. Some of these instances seem to me to be very striking. A smaller world. It is greatly racked by the attention of this earth. Black substances is torn down from it. Not until 6 hours later, after an approach still closer, does this earth suffer perturbation. As to the extraordinary spectacle of a thing, world superconstruction that was seen in the sky in 1816, I have not yet been able to find out more. I think that here our acceptance is relatively sound. That is, that this occurrence was tremendously of more importance than such occurrences, say transits of Venus, upon which hundreds of papers have been written. That not another mention have I found, though I have not looked so especially as I look for more data. That all but undetailed record of this occurrence was suppressed. Altogether, we have considerable agreement here between data of vast masses that do not fall to this earth, but from which substances fall, and data of fields of ice from which ice may not fall, but from which water may drip. I'm beginning to modify that at a distance from this earth, gravitation has more effect than we have supposed, though less effect than the dogmatists suppose and prove. I'm coming out stronger for the acceptance of a neutral zone. That is, Earth, like other magnets, have a neutral zone in which is the Super Sargasso Sea, and which other worlds may be buoyed up, though projecting parts may be subject to this Earth's attraction. But my preference. Here are the data. I now have one of the most interesting of the new correlates. I think I should have brought it in before, but whether out of place here, because not accompanied by earthquake or not, will have it. I offer it as an instance of an eclipse by a vast dark body that has been seen and reported by an astronomer. The astronomer is Amelias. The phenomenon was seen by him at Pernambuco, April 11th, 1860. It was about noon, sky cloudless. Suddenly the light of the sun was diminished. The darkness increased, and to illustrate its intensity, we are told that the planet Venus shone brilliant, but Venus was of low visibility at this time. The observation that burns incense to the new dominant is that around the sun appeared a corona. There are many other instances that indicate proximity of other worlds during earthquakes. I note a few. Quake and an object in the sky called a large luminous meteor. Luminous body in the sky, earthquake, and fall of sand, Italy, February 12th and 13th, 1870. Many reports upon luminous object in the sky and earthquake. Connecticut, February 27th, 1883. Luminous object of meteor in the sky, fall of stones from the sky, and earthquake, Italy, January 20th, 1891. Earthquake and prodigious number of luminous bodies or globes in the air, Boulogne, France, June 7th, 1779. Earthquake at Manila, 1873, and curious luminous appearance in the sky. The most notable appearance of fishes during an earthquake is that of Riobamba. Humboldt sketched one of them, and it's an uncanny-looking thing. Thousands of them appeared upon the ground during this tremendous earthquake. Humboldt says that they were cast up from subterranean sources. I think not myself, and have data for thinking not. But there'd be such a row arguing back and forth that it's simpler to consider a clear instance of the fall of living fishes from the sky during an earthquake. I can't quite accept myself whether a large lake and all the fishes in it was torn down from some other world, or a lake in the Super Sargasso Sea, distracted between two pulling worlds, was dragged down to this Earth. Here are the data. February 16th, 1861, an earthquake at Singapore. Then came an extraordinary downpour of rain, or as much water as any good-sized lake would consist of. For 3 days, this rain or this fall of water came down in torrents, in pools on the ground formed by this deluge. Great numbers of fishes were found. The writer says that he had himself seen nothing but water fall from the sky. Whether I'm emphasizing what a deluge it was or not, he says that so terrific had been the downpour that he had not been able to see 3 steps away from him. The natives said that the fishes had fallen from the sky. 3 days later, the pools dried up and many dead fishes were found. But in the first place, though that's an expression for which we have an instinctive dislike, the fishes had been active and uninjured. Then follows material for another of our little studies in the phenomena of disregard. A psychotropism here is mechanically to take a pen in hand and mechanically write that fishes found on the ground after a heavy rainfall came from overflowing streams. The writer of the account says that some of the fishes had been found in his courtyard, which was surrounded by high walls. Paying no attention to this, a correspondent explains that in the heavy rain, a body of water had probably overflowed, carrying fishes with it. We are told by the first writer that these fishes of Singapore were of a species that was very abundant near Singapore. So I think myself that a whole lake full of them had been shaken down from the Super Sargasso Sea under the circumstances we have thought of. However, if appearance of strange fishes after an earthquake be more pleasing in the sight or to the nostrils of the new dominant, we faithfully and piously supply that incense. On account of the occurrence at Singapore was read by M. de Castelnau before the French Academy. M. de Castelnau recalled that upon a former association he had submitted to the Academy the circumstance that fishes of a new species had appeared at the Cape of Good Hope after an earthquake. It seems proper, and it will give luster to the new orthodoxy, now to have an instance in which not merely quake and fall of rocks or meteorites, or quake and either eclipse or luminous appearances in the sky have occurred, but in which are combined all the phenomena, one or more of which, when accompanying an earthquake, indicate in our acceptance the proximity of another world. This time, a longer duration is indicated than in other instances. In the Canadian Institute Proceedings 2-7-198, there is an account by the Deputy Commissioner at Dhurmsala of the extraordinary Dhurmsala meteorite coated with ice, but the combination of events related by him is still more extraordinary. And within a few months of the fall of this meteorite, there had been a fall of live fishes at Benares, a shower of red substance at Farrukhabad, a dark spot observed on the disk of the sun, an earthquake, an unnatural darkness of some duration, and a luminous appearance in the sky that looked like an aurora borealis. But there's more to this climax. We are introduced to a new order of phenomena. Visitors. The Deputy Commissioner writes that in the evening after the fall of the Dhurmsala meteorite, or mass of stone covered with ice, he saw lights. Some of them were not very high. They appeared and went out and reappeared. I have read many accounts of the Dhurmsala meteorite, July 28, 1860, but never in any other of them a mention of this new correlate, something as out of place in the 19th century as would have been an aeroplane, the invention of which would not, in our acceptance, have been permitted in the 19th century, though adumbrations to it were permitted. Adumbrations, I don't know that word. This writer says that the lights moved like fire balloons, but I am sure that they were neither fire balloons, lanterns, nor bonfires, or any other thing of that sort, but bona fide lights in the heavens. It's a subject for which we shall have to have a separate expression. Trespassers upon territory to which something else has a legal right. Perhaps someone lost a rock, and he and his friends came down looking for it in the evening, or secret agents or emissaries who had an appointment with certain esoteric ones near Dhurmsala. Things or beings coming down to explore and unable to stay down long. In a way, other strange occurrence during an earthquake is suggested. The ancient Chinese tradition, the marks like hoof marks in the ground. We have thought, with a low degree of acceptance, of another world that may be in secret communication with certain esoteric ones of this earth's inhabitants, and of messages and symbols like hoof marks that are sent to some receptor or special hill upon this earth, and of messages that at times miscarry. This other world comes close to this world. There are quakes, but advantage of proximity is taken to send a message. The message, designed for a receptor in India, perhaps, or in Central Europe, miscarries all the way to England. Marks like the marks of the Chinese tradition are found upon a beach in Cornwall after an earthquake. Quake of July 15, 1757, upon the sands of Penzance, Cornwall, in an area of more than 100 square yards, were found marks like hoofprints, except that they were not crescentic. We see a similarity, but note an arbitrary disregard of our own this time. It seems to us that marks described as little cones surrounded by basins of equal diameter would be like hoofprints if hoofs printed complete circles. Other disregards are that there were black specks on the tops of cones, as if something perhaps gaseous had issued from them, that from one of these formations came a gush of water as thick as a man's wrist. Of course, the opening of springs is common in earthquakes, but we suspect, myself, that the negative absolute is compelling us to put in this datum and its disorders. There's another matter in which the negative absolute seems to work against us. Though to superchemistry we have introduced the principle of celestio-metathesis, we have no good data of exchange of substances during proximities. The data are all of falls and not of upward translations. Of course, upward impulses are common during earthquakes, but I haven't a datum upon a tree or a fish or a brick or a man that ever did go up and stay up and that never did come down again. Our classic of the horse and barn occurred in what was called a whirlwind. It is said that in an earthquake in Calabria, paving stones shot up far in the air. The writer doesn't specifically say that they came down again, but something seems to tell me they did. The corpses of Riobamba. Humboldt reported that in the earthquake of Riobamba, bodies were torn upward from graves, that the vertical motion was so strong that bodies were tossed several hundred feet in the air. I explained that if in the center of greatest violence of an earthquake anything ever has gone up and has kept on going up, the thoughts of the nearest observers were very likely upon other subjects. The quay of Lisbon, we are told that it went down. A vast throng of persons ran to the quay for refuge. The city of Lisbon was in profound darkness. The quay and all the people on it disappeared. If it and they went down, not a single corpse, not a shred of clothing, not a plank of quay, nor so much as a splinter of it ever floated to the surface.